So if you feel like you're dealing with malabsorption issues and you don't understand why or how to improve that issue, you're not alone. Lena sent us an email that said, how to fix malabsorption. No matter how healthy I eat, how healthy my lifestyle is, I am always deficient in vitamins and minerals, and my health issues don't improve. And this is a pretty common question that we get, like Lena's here. So in this video, I'm going to help you understand what is malabsorption all about, what seem to be the most probable causes of malabsorption, and what steps can you take to improve it. You don't want to miss this.
T.C. Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
So remember, I'm not a doctor, I'm not giving anybody medical advice here, and I'm certainly not giving Lena any advice because I don't know Lena, I don't know her specific situation, so I couldn't possibly know what the right steps would be for her. I just want to share some studies and some information as I dig through malabsorption on the internet to help you understand what you might be looking at when you're researching this topic. So to start off, let's jump over to the Cleveland Clinic website where they're giving us an overview of what is malabsorption, and they say it's an umbrella term for a wide range of disorders that affect your ability to absorb nutrients from your food. So malabsorption can lead to indigestion and even malnutrition, and it's not from a lack of eating nutrients but from an inability to absorb those nutrients. And they go on to say that if you can think of digestion as a three-part process. The first part is breaking down your food into digestible pieces. The second part is absorbing all the nutrients in your food. And the third part is eliminating waste after you get all the good stuff out of that. And they go on to say that if you have digestive difficulties, the problem could be in any of these three stages, and malabsorption disorders cover that second stage. So they're talking about the absorbing stage. So that's what the malabsorption is all about, that inability to absorb the nutrients. So to understand this a little bit further, we want to look at this digestive process. And if you've seen a lot of my videos, you're going to see this again. I've talked about this 174 times, and then I talked about it one more time, but I didn't film that time. So basically when we eat food, this is where that digestive process really starts. There's things that happen in the mouth, all enzymes and all this stuff. But when the food comes here, the stomach is supposed to make hydrochloric acid, or HCl, that is meant to help us start to acidify that food, to start that breakdown process. That's where we start to break the food down into the smaller digestible pieces like the Cleveland Clinic was talking about. And then once that food is acidified, it leaves the stomach and comes down here into the duodenum, which is the first 10 inches of the small intestine. And then that triggers this gallbladder to squirt this alkaline bile down that helps us neutralize the acids from the stomach. It also helps us emulsify or break down our dietary fats. So we have to break down dietary fats just like we have to break down proteins and other types of nutrients. And then as this bile is coming down to help neutralize this acid, all of this stuff also triggers the pancreas to squirt out bicarb, which is also alkaline and helps us neutralize those acids, and also enzymes that help us break our food down further. And then after that, it moves down here into the small intestine where it moves through, and that's where we're really absorbing those nutrients. And there's things that can go wrong with this lining of the small intestine that can be damaged. There's issues that can create damage there and restrict our ability to really absorb those nutrients. And when you research malabsorption, that's usually what you're going to find. Oh man, all this stuff is broken. You can't absorb things. This is malabsorption, so you don't have the ability to absorb things, so we're going to blame this area here. The problem is, there's a wide variety of reasons that a person might not be making enough stomach acid. Millions of people turn off their stomach acid on purpose every day. And beyond that, there are issues that can restrict the body's ability to produce that hydrochloric acid. So a lot of people are not making enough stomach acid to acidify their food and start that process of breaking the food down into smaller pieces like the Cleveland Clinic was talking about. There's also a wide variety of issues where the bile in this gallbladder can become too thick and sticky to flow correctly, and it won't come down and help us emulsify our dietary fats. It won't help neutralize these acids and trigger all these things with the bicarb and the enzymes coming out. You know, there's this issue where when stuff is acidified correctly and then it comes down here and meets all these alkaline substances, that opposite pHs colliding creates like this sizzle that really helps us bust the food apart and get all of the nutrients out of that food. So a person can have this malfunction here or malfunctions here before it ever gets down here. So we've already established here that this can create this inability to break our food down. And when we come back to this Cleveland Clinic, they're talking about that malabsorption can lead to indigestion because they see indigestion and malabsorption together. So they're like, oh man, this must be causing that. What if it's the other way around? I have another video where I explain dyspepsia and indigestion, and for the most part, the studies that I share in that video talk about that it's really about low stomach acid and an inability to break that food down. Indigestion means a lack of digestion. So that first part is a very common thing that goes wrong. I'll put a link in the description below for that video on steps to improve dyspepsia and indigestion. I'm not going to go into that a whole bunch here, but if you want to see all the studies and references for that piece of information, we'll put that link in the description below so you can check out that video. But what if it's not always this issue of these small intestinal linings can't absorb the nutrients correctly? What if all that is working okay and the breakdown is further up the line? Remember, the Cleveland Clinic explained the digestive process as step 1 is the food has to be broken down into smaller pieces. Step 2 is the absorbing part. So can step 2 ever happen in many things when step 1 hasn't happened? Why do we blame this if there are malfunctions up here? That would be like somebody trying to win the Daytona 500. I'm going to be a participant in this race car race, and they don't have a race car. Step 1 to successfully winning a race car race is to have a race car. As the guy's running around the track trying to keep up with race cars going 200 miles an hour, would the announcers be like, man, that guy needs to improve his driving skills. He doesn't seem very focused. He should be more focused if he wants to try to win this race. He doesn't have a car. He's running around. He skipped step 1, and they're blaming him for step 2. So when we're blaming step 2 for not working correctly when step 1 is going wrong somewhere up here, are we really looking at this with the intelligent part of our brain? I don't know. So when we look back at the Cleveland Clinic saying these 3 stages of digestion, breakdown, then is the absorbing, and then is the elimination. So why do we blame the absorption if step 1 isn't working out? So what I thought about was, well, a lack of stomach acid is called hypochlorhydria. So what if we put into Google, can hypochlorhydria cause malabsorption? And here's what Google says. Yes, low stomach acid, also known as hypochlorhydria, can cause malabsorption. Malabsorption when the body can't absorb nutrients from food properly. And they talk about there's a lot of studies that show that low stomach acid can lead to deficiencies in nutrients like vitamin B12, calcium, iron, and magnesium. They say that low stomach acid can create symptoms like indigestion, heartburn, and nausea, and that low stomach acid can lead to a bacterial overgrowth in that small intestine. So if we have a lot of bacteria in the small intestine where they shouldn't be, our good bacteria should be in the large intestine. We shouldn't have a lot in the small intestine. So if there's an overgrowth there, that has the ability to restrict our ability to really access the nutrients in that food. So the lining of that intestinal pathway may be okay, but it could be an overgrowth that's creating trouble. Even worse, some types of overgrowth, whether it's yeast, mold, fungal issues, have the ability to damage that intestinal lining and restrict the ability for us to absorb our nutrients correctly. So sometimes that can be the cause. So when we look at this study on nutritional aspects of Helicobacter pylori infection, which is an H. pylori infection, they say that several observations demonstrated a correlation between H. pylori and malabsorption of essential nutrients. Studies have shown an association between H. pylori infection and iron deficiency anemia, while the absorption of some vitamins such as vitamin B12, vitamin A, vitamin C, folic acid, and vitamin E may have been infected by the infection as well. And they go on to say that when you eradicate this infection, that the ability to absorb these nutrients has the ability to improve. And what we talked about in a lot of our videos is that that lack of stomach acid not only restricts your ability to acidify and start that breaking down of the food process, that stomach acid is also the barrier to the whole body. That's what kills the bad guys when they're coming in on the food that we're eating. So if someone doesn't have enough stomach acid, now they have the ability for an infection to come in, set up camp, have a keg party, raise their kids, and create all kinds of trouble. So when we look at this study, mealtime supplementation with betaine HCl for functional hypochlorhydria, in this study basically what they did is they took a bunch of healthy people and then they gave them a PPI to turn off their ability to make stomach acid, and they created hypochlorhydria just to see, oh, what steps can we take to improve this low stomach acid issue? And what they did is they had people supplement with betaine HCl, which is a supplemental form of HCl that a person can take with their meals and help acidify the stomach correctly if the stomach is not being acidified by the body like it should. And they say that this mealtime postprandial hypochlorhydria may contribute to poor protein digestion, reduced micronutrient absorption or malabsorption, increased risk of dysbiosis, SIBO, or other symptoms associated with functional dyspepsia. Therefore, it is not unreasonable for integrative and functional medicine clinicians to consider oral supplementation of gastric acid in the form of betaine HCl to help reduce mealtime stomach pH. So what they saw was that the people that turned off all their stomach acid had a lot of these symptoms that went along with indigestion and malabsorption, but when they supplemented with the betaine HCl in their meal to help acidify that food correctly, that those symptoms and issues improved greatly. And I'll put a link to that study below so you can check that out further. But we see that the hypochlorhydria has the ability to restrict our ability to break our food down. That's why we eat the food, is to get the nutrients out of that food, and we have to break the food down to get the nutrients out of that food. How would the nutrients ever possibly be absorbed if they're not breaking down properly? Do you feel like your intestinal pathway could absorb an apple? You can't absorb an apple, it's like this big. You have to break it down to be able to absorb the nutrients in that apple. Another issue we need to think about is cholestasis, or when bile becomes too thick and sticky to flow correctly, like we were talking about before. There's a wide variety of issues that can cause this bile to become too thick and sticky to flow correctly. A lot of people had the problem so bad that it concentrated into these gallstones, and they had a gallbladder attack and had to have their gallbladder removed. So now they don't have a way to store that bile to come down and help really digest our food correctly. If that's your scenario, we'll put a link in the description below for our video on 6 steps to improve digestion if you've lost your gallbladder. But here, when we look at this study of fat absorption and lipid metabolism and cholestasis, they say that many reports have indicated the existence of significantly decreased fat-soluble vitamin levels under cholestatic conditions. Fat-soluble vitamins are highly dependent on solubilization by bile acids, and a lack of bile flow inevitably results in malabsorption and depletion of fat-soluble vitamin stores. So we need that bile flowing correctly in order to be able to break down and access fat-soluble vitamins like A, E, D, and K. Those are kind of a big deal. We kind of need those just to be humans. So if you're wondering, how do I know if my bile is flowing correctly? I'm not going to cover all that here, but I'll put a link in the description below for our video on 10 signs of poor bile flow, so you can check that out if you want to look deeper into that. But we can see that when we're looking at these things, there's a lot of things here that can create this malabsorption. Is it really just about, oh, your small intestinal lining is broken and it doesn't work very well? It can be, but when we're looking at why would that be the case, sometimes it can be because step 1 was not working. That acidification was not working correctly. The other part of step 1, maybe that's the bile flow and all those other things that need to be triggered by that acidic product leaving the stomach. It's the acids coming into that small intestine, or sometimes fats coming into that small intestines, or even amino acids that trigger the bile to drop and that trigger all these things to happen from the pancreas. So we really need that step 1 happening to start this process working correctly so that we can absorb the nutrients from our food. Okay, so these things make sense. Am I saying this is what's going on? Yeah, science doesn't seem to think that's what's going on. When I look at the things that I dig into, that makes sense in the intelligent part of my brain, if I have an intelligent part of my brain, but that's not really what they're saying is going on. But when we look at things that make sense according to the medical literature, what are the steps that would improve that? What can we do to improve a malabsorption issue? Well, that one study showed that if we correct a low stomach acid problem, that a lot of those problems improve in the people in those studies. Is that going to happen to you? I don't know. Maybe you're different from the people in the studies. Maybe they were all wearing ugly sweaters. I don't really know. Another thing that we want to look at, though, is that if there's an overgrowth in the stomach or the small intestine, like a SIBO issue or a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, like all the cool kids have these days, if there's an issue like that, that seems to need to be taken down. You need to correct that issue so that not only the body can make more of its own stomach acid, sometimes an infection in that stomach can restrict the production of HCl. And there's other reasons the body might not make enough HCl, but that can be one of them. So that needs to be improved so that we can assimilate and break down our food correctly. If we have a bile flow issue, it seems like that would need to be improved too. So maybe step 3 is if there's a bile flow issue, that needs to be corrected. And if you don't know how to do these things, if you haven't seen enough videos from us, my book, Kick Your Fat in the Nuts, chapters 3 and 4, kind of walk through figuring out which aspects of digestion are not working correctly and what steps can you take to improve those. And the book is available on Amazon, but I'll put a link in the description below so you can get the whole thing totally for free. And then you can just jump to chapters 3 and 4 and figure out those situations for you. Because what's going wrong can be different from person to person. We kind of see that as we're going through all those issues. And step number 4 could be digestive enzymes, supplementing with digestive enzymes. As we age, some of those stores kind of deplete. It seems like we don't have as many enzymes that we had when we were younger. And also, if we're not eating as many raw foods, if we're cooking everything and processing everything, that can kill those enzymes. So for a lot of people, supplementing with digestive enzymes can really help with that final process of really breaking the food down into the nutrients that the body can utilize. So just remember, if you're dealing with a malabsorption issue, there's a possibility that the lining of your small intestine is damaged and it doesn't have the ability to absorb nutrients as well as it should. But with all these other issues going on, if you have any other digestive symptoms at all, then it makes sense to look at the most common malfunctions, take steps to improve those malfunctions, and when you do your symptoms or does your malabsorption improve? I don't know. You'll have to tell me how that goes. You'll have to come back and let us know in the comments how things went for you. But I hope that helps make sense of a topic that when you research it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I hope that can give you some information that will help you figure out what's going to help you the most. I can't wait to hear about your results.